Hey, hello everyone. Hoping everyone is doing well. Thank you for joining at this particular ACWAY Fellows Talk webinar web session. Um, I think we're going to start in maybe a minute or two. It feels as if people are trickling in, but I think just in this interest of time, we're going to just jump straight into it. If that's okay with everyone. All good. So I'm just going to move this and we are about to start. Well, hello, good morning to those who have decided to join and also those who will be watching this recording. To this webinar session titled Ubuntu Threads of Unity, Exploring Interconnectedness, Faith and Youth Activism. I'm Izzy Ben Ebharim, and I'm the Admin and Logistics Head for ACWAY. Today I'll be moderating a conversation that I think is quite interesting for us to explore, considering everything that we're going through as a global community, but also as Africans. Today, we'll be embarking on this journey into the essence of Ubuntu, an African belief in the universal bond of sharing that all that connects us within humanity, and its profound implications for faith and youth activism. Now, to achieve this, how do we do this? We're going to engage in a conversation with three individuals that I think have insightful things to share with us in this discussion. And I'm hoping that through these discussions that we'll have, perspectives and responses to the themes will come out, and we'll be able to have a nuanced experience with just this concept of Ubuntu, but also as interfaith practitioners, dialogue practitioners, how these concepts can anchor our work. Before we do this, before we have this conversation, this type of this engagement stems from a partnership with the Ubuntu Festival. And this is an initiative founded by one of our guest speaker, Babalwa Ngcongolo, who joins us today. This festival, the Ubuntu Festival, is a celebration of Ubuntu, a concept deeply rooted in African philosophy, emphasizing this interconnectedness and community. However, I'm hoping that this exploration that we have today extends beyond its traditional boundaries as we delve into the realms of interfaith and youth and dialogue. And today we are fortunate enough to have fellows from Africa to share their perspectives and responses to the themes today. And to those who are watching this, who is new to ACWAY, ACWAY is a youth-led grassroots organization promoting religious and cultural harmony. We are a global network of young interfaith dialogue practitioners, fostering coexistence and interfaith relations. And we try to do this by facilitating understanding between peoples from diverse backgrounds, educating on various beliefs, and empowering youth through some form of skill development. Now, it's quite interesting that we're having this conversation today, as it comes hot off the heels of the Golden Rule Day, which was celebrated celebrated on the 5th of April. And the Golden Rule Day, which I'm pretty sure most people who are either from Abrahamic traditions or basically in the Western world, the Golden Rule promotes this idea of treating others as you would like to be treated. This principle is echoed in many faith traditions, and I think a conversation could be had about whether it encapsulates the essence of Ubuntu. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of all beings and fostering a sense of empathy and compassion towards one another. Now, I do have a section here where I will dive into Ubuntu, but I think there are more well-spoken individuals amongst us who will be able to give some insights into Ubuntu itself. So I will pause that and jump straight to who we have with us today. So we're honored to have Babalwa Ngcongolo from South Africa. I'll read their bios as I go through each speaker. We have Khadija Tirha from Morocco and Italy, and we have Kudzaishe Manenji from Zimbabwe. And together, I'm hoping that we'll be able to discuss this concept of Ubuntu, its impact on interfaith dialogue, youth engagement, and hopefully just to explore this concept and see how it resonates with us. So to kickstart this exploration, we will jump straight to Babalwa, and I'm going to take a moment to read your bio just to get a sense of who you are. Babalwa Ngcongolo is a diversity, equity, and transformation consultant, a social justice educator, activist, and facilitator. Her work focuses on engaging young people on the challenges and opportunities for creating new and future-focused solutions for social cohesion, peace, and justice. Babalwa holds studies in economics and finance, design thinking, interfaith collaboration, peace building, and inclusive leadership. These influence her role in facilitating dialogue that is empathetic, yet challenging the norms, of norms that are rooted in discrimination and injustice. Babalwa is the Executive Director of Changeways Center for Collaborative Justice, and also sits on the board of the Charter for Compassion and the Cape Town Interfaith Initiative. Babalwa has experience working with schools, universities, and the civil and private sectors to develop and implement strategic processes for dialogue, collaboration, and community building on a global, local, and institutional level. She has coordinated youth leadership programs, developed diversity curricula, and facilitated peace-building interventions for national and international audiences. Her work aims to apply an intersectional lens to unearth the interconnectedness of the world's most pressing issues and the systemic solutions that may emanate from the nuanced lens. Babalwa aspires to codify equity, justice, and kindness into the simplest and most complex interactions across all communities. Thank you so much for joining us, Babalwa. And I am so excited for you to be here because I think the concept of Ubuntu is something that is used quite a lot within a South African context. I mean, there are certain communities that I think will use it more than others, but it's been a term that has been used, especially in a post-apartheid South Africa. Now, for some, Ubuntu is a new concept, and for others, not so much. But I would just maybe want us to take a moment and, in your own words, for you to share this concept of Ubuntu, however you feel comfortable, and how this exists and plays out in your context.
Hi, Izzy. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to join you today. I think it's so interesting, that question, because quite interestingly for me, Ubuntu is a term that it's difficult to describe. It's difficult to describe because it feels so embedded within at least the culture, the community that I come from. Ubuntu it's almost an undefined energy that lives within people and governs the way that we operate within community. It's just this deep sense of care for the other, and care for your environment and care for yourself. And so it's quite interesting to me that a concept that almost is unquestioned, undefined, has become this sort of huge thing that we talk about. It becomes this huge, idea that has spawned very interesting economic theories and political theories, and social justice theories, even criminal justice theories. The way that Ubuntu has been, taken and has traveled is quite interesting to me. I think quite simply, when I think about the term Ubuntu, I think it's a deep recognition, it's a deep respect, it's a deep responsibility. concerning how we engage with the other. And I think the only way that we can engage with the other in a responsible way is to look at how we engage with ourselves, first and foremost. And then for me, it takes a step further and it speaks to how we engage with the environment, how we engage with spirit, because we are spiritual beings. And so Ubuntu is this term that really, for me, says that there is something that qualifies us as human. There is something that qualifies our humanity. And it's not this idea that we're more intelligent, that we're smarter than other species, or we're more capable than other species. I think it just speaks to a deep awe, respect, and care for all that makes us, for all that contributes to us, and really thinking deeply about how we contribute to the other and the earth. You know, there are obviously leaders like Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who spoke about Ubuntu being this term that speaks to our inextricable connection to each other. And it's such a beautiful way, I think, of us to conceptualize what it means to be in community. It's that every decision that I make, everything that I do, everything that I say, everything, any way that I act has an impact, not just on myself, it has an impact on others and community. And it speaks to this idea that when we are in community, we have a specific responsibility towards each other. And so Ubuntu is that idea of there is something that qualifies us. And to me, what qualifies us is this ability to really be in community with each other in a way that's caring and kind. But I think even more so as young people, I think there's a way that we speak to Ubuntu now that's very different to how it was spoken to, I think, before. You know, in South Africa, the term Ubuntu, it's a Southern African term, but the term Ubuntu itself was used a lot during the dawn of our democracy. It was used by leaders to do this work of rehumanizing people, because we came from a system, a political system, a social system, an economic system that separated people according to race, that created these hierarchies that meant that we didn't see each other and we didn't have the opportunity to see each other beyond how we are defined by society or by the government, right, according to race. And so what Ubuntu was used for was this tool to say, well, how do I see you, my brother, regardless, or my sister, or my sibling, regardless of your race, your gender, your belief system? How do I just see you as a human and a person? How do I interact with you, seeing that there is an essence within you that connects deeply with the essence within me? And you know, it was a beautiful way to bring us together. But I think there's a new conversation now, because I think as young people, Ubuntu is a very serious call for us not just to hold hands in a circle and sing Kumbaya, right? It's a very serious call for us in a way that isn't patronizing, in a way that isn't almost contrived. It's a very serious call for us to recognize how important our humanity is and how important it is for us to be in connection and to be in understanding and care of each other, particularly in a world that is facing all sorts of injustices, particularly political injustices, economic injustices, systemic injustices across the board for different people and different places around the world. It's a call for us not to just pretend as if we care for the other, but in very difficult moments where our humanity is tested, are we able to show up with that responsibility and that care and that concern for the other? And so I want to leave it there in terms of defining Ubuntu, because again, it means so much to so many different people. But at least from where I come from, in my standpoint, that is sort of, my definition, at least.
Thank you so much for that. I think you've given a really wonderful, wholesome definition, but also positioning it within a specific context. And when it comes to interfaith dialogue and youth activism, which I know you have been heavily involved over the last couple of years, with the number of projects, not only being a part of it, but also leading it, I would then ask the question, And especially since a lot of us think of interfaith dialogue as kumbaya. I mean, you know, like this whole, let's get everyone together and not have those difficult conversations. How would you say that this philosophy intersects with both your interfaith dialogue work and well, youth activism? And what would be those implications?
Sure. I think of my work particularly because I think my work is something that started from a very young age. I come from a home where, you know, my father is a religious leader. My mother works within the legal system, the justice system. And so I was always raised, I think, right at the intersection of faith and justice. And to me, I think that within the interfaith world and within the interfaith space, there is a tendency sometimes to we want to get along so much that we ignore the circumstances that have meant that many people experience injustices because of faith. Maybe it's because of other factors within a specific context, a specific country or region. But because we just want to get along, we're always like, well, what makes us the same? Instead of thinking about, well, systemically, what is leading to our differences being the cause of our separation? What are the circumstances that are creating divisions within our community? And it's often not this idea that our differences are separating us. It really is this idea that we other people in ways that are very dangerous, and we other people in ways that are very violent. And we need to address that. And that all sits in the space of justice. It sits in the space of social justice. And so I think in my work very early on, I got really frustrated that we were coming together to speak, particularly in the context of South Africa. I was, you know, working on specific projects, and we'd come together to speak about interfaith and different religions, but we'd never think about why the mosque is in a particular community in Cape Town, and the big church cathedral is in a particular space in Cape Town, and why the Hindu temple was in a different space in Cape Town, and how all of those spaces and places of worship still follow, very sadly, they still follow apartheid spatial planning, right? Is that you would find a mosque in a former quote unquote colored community. You'd find the Hindu temple in what was segregated as the Indian community. And so you find that in our social system, integration isn't truly happening. And the way that we're learning about our faiths is in a very isolated and yet still steeped in social injustices, and the legacy of social injustices and political injustices and economic injustices. And those are things that I think sometimes we ignore within our faith spaces. We ignore the fact that, you know, one of the reasons why we don't, for example, learn a lot about indigenous religions is because indigenous religions and people who are practicing mostly live in areas that are not considered privileged or not considered quote unquote safe, right? And people avoid those realities. They avoid how the economic intersects with the religious, intersects with the political, intersects with the historical, and continue to perpetuate divisions, and continue to then perpetuate divisions spiritually as well, or religiously as well. And so I think that there's a very serious way that we have to do the work of interfaith that doesn't ignore the idea that we are living in systems of injustice, and we're experiencing them, and we're experiencing them within our interfaith spaces, within our religious spaces. And part of the work that we need to do is to call for justice in our work, and, you know, to speak to it and not to ignore it because we're afraid of it, or we think that it's too difficult to talk about. I think that that should be at the forefront of our interfaith dialogue, because that is where the divisions fester. That is where the religious intolerances fester. And so the more we can integrate our communities beyond just this idea of, oh, I know a little bit about what it means to be a Muslim, or I know a little bit about what it means to practice Hinduism, being able to fully understand the circumstances that surround where we practice our faiths, why we practice our faiths in that area, and how we can then integrate our sense of being within community, even across difference, I think just becomes more real and becomes more grounded. And so I think Ubuntu is us, it applies in a sense that it asks us to seriously then consider, are we truly understanding our connection with each other and understanding our responsibility towards each other if we are ignoring elements of the system, the systemic, the economic, the political, that still play a role in the way that people are able to practice their faiths or not practice their faiths. And so those are things I think for me are quite important in a discussion or in a contemplation of how we practice interfaith and how we integrate it with social justice.
Thank you for that. You've given quite a lot of insight into just how we should be looking at our society and also how we should be critical of what is happening within our society. I think we've inherited as young people quite a number of contexts, situations, experiences, not only the physical, but also the mental. And we haven't gotten to the fact that we're having this conversation, it means that we haven't gotten to the point for us to be able to break down either those boundaries, those ideals that are keeping us separated. And in speaking about that, a lot of the work that we do as dialogue practitioners or social justice activists is also to go beyond the boundaries, just to bring people together. And one of one of those spaces that I'm quite happy to put onto the table for us to also explore is one of your initiatives, the Ubuntu Festival, which is also why we're having this conversation. This festival is a space that you created, that's your brainchild, you created, you're the founder of this. But it seems to be a space for people of diversity to come together and recognize something in unison, in togetherness. The question is just the motivation for this inception of a festival or the Ubuntu Festival. And I think, what did you envision? What are you envisioning for this? We've just experienced this 2 weeks ago. We had an amazing time at the festival, and we're hoping it happens next year again. But what was the motivation for this? And also, what were you wanting to achieve? What does that look like for you?
So, I mean, the festival actually was inspired by a film that was created, that was actually developed by the Charter for Compassion, and it follows Pato Banton, Antoinette Root's daughter, across 10 African countries, capturing these stories of compassion or these stories of Ubuntu. And to me, it was quite interesting that they were going to come back. The film is done. It's won numerous awards across the globe, and they're currently Pato and Antoinette are currently doing this tour of Africa, sharing the film with those who are participating within the film. And to me, it was quite interesting because one of the things that I thought about is this is a Southern, Ubuntu is a Southern African term. And it's interesting to me that it's a term that's being used so much globally. But I think I was very concerned about, but what are we saying about Ubuntu today? What are we as young people on this continent, how are we defining it for ourselves? How are we ideating this idea of Ubuntu and owning it as our own, right? And it really is, the festival itself was really imagined as a space for us to ideate about, I guess, the quote unquote African dream, and what that is for us, but also what is required for us to live in an ideal of justice, of peace, in an ideal of, in the ideal of just shared community in a country and in a world and in a continent like ours. I think the Ubuntu Festival really was about having a very difficult and courageous conversation about whether we are living Ubuntu. Does it exist in the way that we practice it? And if so, how do we make it and continue to make it relevant? And if not, how then do we bring it into the practices that we experience, not just on a one-on-one relational basis, but particularly in a systemic sense? Particularly in when we think about what it means to live in a global context, right? Are we being responsible with our humanity or with what makes us human? Are we being responsible with our responsibility towards the earth, towards our neighbors, towards ourselves, right? Are we embracing healthy practices for ourselves? Or, are we sort of behaving in practices that aren't? And so it was really about how do we contemplate, how do we live in, and how do we ideate this principle of Ubuntu practically within ourselves, within our communities, within our spiritual practices, within our environment. And so that was the core, I guess, of the festival. And I think it was an incredible space. And one of our participants at one of our events said that they're grateful for the space. They were grateful for the Ubuntu Festival because it wasn't necessarily a safe space, but it was a brave space for people to explore, and particularly young people to think really deeply about, their responsibility to this term, particularly 30 years after the dawn of our democracy in South Africa, 30 years into democracy. But even more than that, we're in a year where globally, so many countries, I think over 160 countries are participating in elections. And I think for us, it's very important to then have a conversation about, but what are the policies that matter to us? And do they at the core, are they human-centered? Do they help us forward this idea of our humanity? Do they bring us closer to what we are thinking about or working towards when we think about, for example, the golden rule? Does it help us do that, or does that take us further away? And I thought it's such a timely moment to consider those very important questions at this point, and to engage in it in a space that allows us to, embrace joy and embrace, having fun and being creative, but also have time to really seriously think about our responsibility as it relates to this idea of Ubuntu.
As you were speaking, I was reflecting on one of the conversations that we had, and it's something that I've been thinking about for quite some time, well, since the conversation transpired, with this idea of appropriation of this concept of Ubuntu. And so, as you stated, here we have individuals who are not from Southern Africa, who have created this film and have been speaking about this concept in a particular context that I think the connectivity is questionable, or it's to what extent is this concept of Ubuntu within an American how does it play out within an American context? And so I definitely understand, and I see the necessity for having those conversations in the place where it was birthed, or where it's embedded, where it's rooted in. But that being said, noting that this concept somewhat has a life of its own. It will move into spaces where you cannot enter or do not enter. I think it would be interesting for us to understand, or for us to know, what would this look like? So in order to foster some form of social cohesion, some equity within our contemporary society, how do you, if you had to take off your lens and share that with us, how would you see that play out within other contexts that is not, say, Southern Africa or Africa, in Australia, in the Far East, in the Americas? What would that look like, knowing that this concept's moved into those spaces now?
Yeah, I think the word appropriated is a very interesting one, right? And in some ways, Ubuntu has been, because, Ubuntu, if you break it down into its etymology, I guess, Ubu means the way, and Ntu actually is a reference to the first ancestor of the Bantu people, right? It's the first ancestor of a particularly Southern African tribe. And so, that first ancestor being recognized not just as necessarily a person, but even just a consciousness. That is actually what we speak about Ubuntu. It's the way of Ntu. It is the way of that first being who had the earth and had to rely on the earth and had to rely on the other, and didn't have a system besides this deep trust within what was around them and what was leading them in terms of spirit. And so I think it's very important for us to recognize that when we speak about Ubuntu, that's actually where it's rooted. And I think when I consider how we do the work of Ubuntu practically, and this is what you're speaking to as well, is that it's a term that, yes, it's embedded here in Southern Africa. It's traveled across the world. But Ubuntu really is a personal, it's a deeply personal process, because our contexts differ so much. But one thing that I think it asks us to do is to really reflect on how we are living our lives and how we are participating in our society, and whether within the way that we are living and participating in society, it is still connected to that way of trust, that way of recognizing that all that you do, all that you are, all that you think has an impact on the other, right? And not just the other, it has an impact on our spiritual lives, it has an impact on our religious lives, it has an impact on our relationships, it has an impact on the earth. And it is asking us then to think about and to really consider then, what is my responsibility? Knowing this within my community, what is my responsibility? And that is such a personal journey, right? Because for some of us, that means that maybe when I see the homeless person sitting on the stoep, I don't chase them away as everyone would want to, because, it's safer if you chase them away and you don't entertain them. But what if I, wake up every day and pack them a sandwich, the same sandwich I pack myself, so that every day when I go past, I give them a sandwich for that day. Small things like that, but it also asks us within the way that we interact and the way that we connect, even in our professional spaces. Are those interactions embedded within Ubuntu? Are the ways that the policies within our country, within our world, do they connect with this idea of being human-centered? And if not, how do I participate within an organization, within politics? How do I then participate to ensure that that human-centered approach is taken? And it's a difficult thing. I mean, it's the same thing within our faith communities. It really is asking us, we have these faith communities and we have these spaces of worship, but do they center the very important idea that the earth is valuable and people are valuable? And that is very much connected to the way that we engage with spirit, or the way that we engage with whoever we acknowledge as God, right? And so it is, in as much as there are loads of ideas, I think that it starts with a very deep introspection and a commitment to take responsibility for that which might be causing us to behave in ways that make us not recognize our common humanity. And so, yeah, it's a process of rehumanizing ourselves, even within the systems and the spaces and the organizations that we exist in. How do we ensure that every single thing that we do is within the practice of rehumanizing, recognizing, and respecting the earth, the self, the other, and spirit?
I the I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm just reflecting on the context that we collectively find ourselves in. And I've been asking myself, what do we go to? Who do we go to in order to gather the strength to do that dehumanizing, to seeing the value in others? Because I mean, if you have a look at traditional, the Abrahamic faiths, if you have a look at, the Eastern faiths, um, there's a power, there's a source that I think is always called upon. And so when I think of these concepts, I'm also seeing the power behind it, but I'm also asking myself, you know, how are we holding on to that? How are we creating spaces like these in order to engage? And I'm also reflecting on just like young activists who are actually on the ground needing to do this type of work. I mean, most of us find ourselves in these dialogue spaces um, where we're needing to let go of preconceived ideas. We're needing to let go of various aspects that inhibit us from connecting with the other. And this concept of Ubuntu, I think, is a fascinating aspect to insert, to have it be a part of that engagement. Because I think it also, if I may just reflect here as well, has a lot to do with ego. There's an aspect of ego that I think one needs to let go of when you implement, when you apply, when you embody this concept of Ubuntu. And I just maybe wanted to pause there and just to see if you had any response to that, because then we'll move on to Khadija and Kudzai share.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ubuntu is characterized very, I think, irresponsibly sometimes as like this, yeah, let's all get along term. But if we are practicing Ubuntu, it is actually a challenge. It is a challenge to us. It is, yes, as you've said, it can be a challenge to the ego. It can be a challenge to the systems that we exist in. It can be a challenge to our communities. It can be a challenge to our spaces of faith, our communities of faith. It can even be a challenge to ourselves. It can be very challenging as an activist who possibly sees that, there are so many issues within the world and we want to go out there and save the world with, our God complexes. But there is something within Ubuntu that says also you need to take care of self. You need to have a strong relationship with self and ensure that in your activism work, you've also done the work of being an activist for yourself. And you've been able to nourish yourself so that you can show up in the world in a better way. But it's also then an acknowledgement that you on your own cannot save the world. And that's also a death to ego, is that, you have to work with other people. You have to understand that you have strengths and you have weaknesses, and where others are strong, you can leverage those strengths, and where others are weak, you can stand in within that gap with your own strengths. And it speaks to just this idea that, we will be consistently challenged with this idea of are we embodying our humanity in its truest sense? Are we speaking up for members of the LGBTQIA plus community in our faith spaces? Are we supporting those who have experienced gender-based violence within our communities, right? Are we calling out our leaders or our spiritual and faith leaders who allow injustices to take place within our communities of faith? It's a challenge. It's a challenge, and it means we won't always be comfortable. We won't always feel safe, doing this work. And it requires then a deep understanding, a deep acceptance of the world that we live in, but also the acceptance of the power that we have within ourselves, but similarly, the power that exists in other people to be a force for good and change within the world. And I think the more we lean into that reality that Ubuntu is a responsibility, and I keep saying it so that, it's understood that it's not just about being friends and neighbors, it's about activating that idea, that friendliness, that neighborliness, right? The things that constitute those things must be part of it. I think is very, very important for us to contemplate that as well.
I'm just reading a comment here from Lilia, and she says, I'm honestly mind blown by this conversation. I think for most of us who've been in these dialogue spaces, I think we take it for granted that we're able to enter these spaces and maneuver however we need to make those connections. But what has been presented here by you, and we're extremely grateful for just your insight and your experience and your input here. It's honestly, I'm hoping it's creating a space for some of us who are practitioners to go back and just reassess, what are we holding on to? Who are we? Where is this responsibility? Do I acknowledge it? Do I own it? But also, do I see value in the self and the other for us to make that connection, to engage? Because we know even if we don't get something out of it now, we're building for something better later on. And so I'm just extremely appreciative of what you've presented. And so thank you so much for what you said. Exactly. I am because you are Kutsashe. I'm also just aware of time, and I want to move on to the other speakers that we do have with us today. And just a bit of context as well as to why we have our ACWAY fellows, both Kutsashe Manenji and Khadija Tirha, why they're with us. It's because in particular contexts, I find it fascinating, especially in interfaith contexts, I find it fascinating that Africa is somewhat always overlooked. And just having experienced this conversation for the last half an hour to 40 minutes, the rest of the world is missing out on so much that peoples from Africa, Africans have to offer. And so I thought, okay, who do we have within our fellow network who could participate, who could engage, but also share from their experiences? Because there's somewhat of a joke to this as well, because, the rest of the world always says Africa is a country. And I'm wanting to see whether, this concept of Ubuntu, while its essence or its foundations are in Southern Africa, whether there are versions of this elsewhere within the African continent. And what does that look like in the north of Africa? What does that look like, in Southern Africa, in the east, in the west? And how does that play out? And so with us today, we have Khadija and Kutsashe. I'm just going to read their bios so that I know we've covered that. Just also noting that I believe Clement has some technical issues. He was the third speaker, but he might pop up. I don't know, but we will just continue as is. If he does pop up, we'll give him the appropriate time. But Khadija is an Afro-European youth worker based in Italy. She's passionate about international cooperation, advancing diversity and inclusion, fostering interfaith dialogue, promoting global citizenship education, and empowering youth. She pursued a double master's degree in international relations of the MENA region and comparative analysis of Mediterranean societies at the University of Turin and the School of Governance and Economics, EGE Robert. Her experience includes working for multiple international organizations, dealing with international cooperation and solidarity. She has participated in many international events around the world, representing Italy over the past few years. She's also a youth delegate at the Council of Europe, a global shaper for the World Economic Forum, a peace builder in IDAV, Interfaith Dialogue on Violent Extremism, and an alumni at the Center for Women, Faith and Leadership at the Institute for Global Engagement, IGE. And then just to introduce Kutsashe, Reverend Father Kutsashe Manenji is a young priest who served in the Anglican Diocese of Western Newfoundland in the Anglican Church of Canada. He lectures remotely at the National Anglican Theological Seminary, specializing in Introduction to World Religions and advanced topics in world religions. Additionally, Manenji is an active member of ACWAY and an Anglican Communion Youth Network. Sorry, and the Anglican Communion Youth Network. His interests lie in practical theology and inter-religious dialogue. In 2013, he authored a book titled 7 Keys to Become a Better Christian. He furthered his education by obtaining a certificate in German speaking and writing from the University of Leipzig in Germany and the Zimbabwe German Society in 2017. That same year, he graduated with a Bachelor of Arts honors degree in economic history from the University of Zimbabwe. In 2019, Manenji earned a Master of Science degree in Development Studies from the Women's University in Africa and a certificate in Pastoral Chaplaincy from Bishop Gall College. Continuing his academic pursuits, he obtained an executive certificate in humanitarian assistance and program management from the University of Zimbabwe in 2020. He also received a diploma in pastoral and theological studies from Bishop Gall College the same year. In 2021, he achieved a Bachelor of Arts honors degree in religion studies. Apart from his academic and pastoral duties, Kudzai enjoys cooking, reading, traveling, counseling, and writing academic and motivational articles. Prior to joining the ministry in 2013, he volunteered for the Young People's Network on HIV and AIDS and sexually reproductive health in Mashonaland, West Province. Thank you so much for the two of you, for Khadija and Kudzai, joining us. I gave a brief intro as to why I would want to have ACWAY Fellows just be a part of this conversation as well, especially from Africa. And so the question to you both would be, we've had this conversation about Ubuntu, and Babalwa has given a wonderful experiential explanation of what that is for her and what that looks like within a particular context. But I would be interested to know, how do you resonate with this concept of Ubuntu, and how does it manifest in your own context? Does your community or cultural background use a different term for this concept, or are there shared principles that align with Ubuntu? Just as a starting question. Either Khadija or Kudzai, either may go first.
May I?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So much. First of all, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, everyone. I am really happy and glad to be here since we are in the end of the Ramadan month. So we are in a blessed month, and together I'm proud to be part of this blessed meeting. Ubuntu term. I remember that a few years ago, I joined a TEDx event in my city, and the title of this TED was Ubuntu Identity, Connected Identity. And that was the first time that I heard Ubuntu in Italy. I was really surprised because I've never heard Ubuntu term in a civil society context. And when I joined that talk, I realized how this term is really important and is not well known in Italy, because I think that a lot of people they believe in the Ubuntu principles, but they don't know the story beside Ubuntu principles. As an Afro-European, because I'm Moroccan, I was born in Morocco, but I grew up in Italy. So I used to define my identity as an Afro-European. I'm Muslim, I'm Italian, I'm Moroccan. So I'm also proud to be both of them. I think that, as I said, the Ubuntu term is not well known in Italy, but we have some words that can be related to the Ubuntu terminology, which is rispetto reciproco, the mutual respect or inclusion, or even solidarity. When we talk about solidarity, we refer to the Ubuntu principle. In my work and also at the personal level, I think that my experience really resonates with the principle of Ubuntu. Even if we don't used to use the Ubuntu term in our daily life, the essence of interconnectedness, compassion, and the communal support guides my endeavors in an international cooperation, diversity, inclusion, and youth empowerment. And also, I think that Ubuntu manifests through my dedication to fostering intercultural and interfaith dialogue, promoting global citizenship education, for example. And also, I think that when you are really active in your society, immediately you believe in the Ubuntu terms, and you believe that we can really, when we are taking care of others, we believe that we should help each other. We should be more to be more solidarity in each other. And also, I really love the sentence, "I'm because we are." Sometimes we used to be really compassionate between each other, and we don't know why, and we don't even ask why we are like that. For me, I'm because like that because I'm a believer. So I have my faith. I believe in God. I try to be the best version of myself. And I think that sharing values such as respect, inclusion, empathy, it's something that we really have to practice in our society. And I think that Ubuntu principle can really guide our interaction and collective efforts towards building a more cohesive and inclusive society. And also we can really share and follow the spirit of Ubuntu. Even if we live in Europe, we live in Italy, we can still sharing this an amazing and beautiful concept of Ubuntu, because I think that we all believe in the Ubuntu, but we don't used to define Ubuntu as a value, but we believe in it because we take care of others, and we believe that we should take care of our neighbors, of our people, our community, because we believe that we should live in a society that really believe in the inclusion, in the coexistence, and that promote the mutual respect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khadija. I think it's quite interesting that we've just spoken about how this term has traveled, and case in point, you've experienced that, but also to know that it's coming with a particular energy. You know, it is arriving in particular places, but there is a resonance. You might not call it Ubuntu, but there is something behind it that, you know, in literature, you think of the motif. There's something there's a thread, a golden thread, that links all of these different experiences. So thank you so much for sharing that. We'll get into the next question, but just Kuzaishe, you are based in Zimbabwe, which is right next to us. In terms of language as well, there might be some similarities, but the concept of Ubuntu, and especially within your work, you know, what does that look like? Is there resonance? How do you make sense of it?
Okay, thank you so much, Izzy, and greetings to all the participants. So I would say that I am a priest, and I'm a religious leader. I think you can see by what I'm wearing, a collar and the cross, and you know, and but I would say that the spirit of Ubuntu is very much present in Zimbabwe, and I was a priest for a long time in a very remote community. I think the other time, and you know. I was there for at least for over a year now. And this story of I am, I think it's all I put in the comment that I am because you are, or I am because we are, you know, it is what defined that community. People in rural communities, there is this so much unity between the people that, you know, I know we do church every Sunday, we do our religious worship every Sunday. And if there is a funeral in that community, that week there wasn't going to be any change. Even if it's a person from a different religion, a different culture, the whole congregation, they would just say, oh, we are not coming to church because one of the members of the community has lost their loved ones, and we just have to be there with them, you know. So there I was as a young priest, as a new priest in that community, and I woke up, I dressed up, and I was prepared. I had my sermon written over, and I was feeling energetic about it. And then I go to church, and the church is empty. So I called one of the leaders, says, "Oh, I'm in church and there is nobody." And he says to me, "Have you indeed heard that there is a funeral?" There is a funeral. I said, "Oh yes, I heard about the funeral, but then if the member is not from our church, so how does that concern us?" And they say, "But he is from our community. So what can we be doing in church when one of us is mourning, when one of us is in distress?" So they went there as a community, and truth being told, I would say in cities, if I'm putting that question, like in Harare, you know, of course, Ubuntu is there, but it's not as strong as you would find it in the rural areas, in the rural communities, you know. And as a priest, I really learned and appreciated that society where people, they look after each other. And, you know, when somebody's crying, therefore, as a community, we are crying. When somebody is happy, therefore, as a community, you are happy, you know. And I also saw that when, you know, when there was that young man whom I married, I with his fiance, it's like their wedding was a community event. All people, all walks of life, and they all put together the food that is eaten. Somebody brings a hen, somebody brings a goat, somebody brings a cup of rice, you know, and the women, they all cook together. There's lots of dancing. So I really experienced that kind of Ubuntu. Probably because of literacy levels, they might not be able to know what Ubuntu means, or they might not be able to see it. But then that was not the only community in Zimbabwe where I experienced the notion of Ubuntu, but it's one perfect example that I've decided to give it to you. So, and I also remember that also when I was in university, in the University of Zimbabwe, I read a story about, I think I don't know if it's factual or it's a legend or it happened, but I'll just tell the story for the, you know. And that was from ours. My lecturer is late. His name was Limbachi, was a Pan-African, and he would say that the spirit of African is that you cannot do harm to your fellow neighbor. You cannot harm your neighbor, because by harming your neighbor, you're harming yourself, you know. So he says that there was this missionary that came to Africa, and he puts a basket of sweets in front of a group of kids, and he told them that the person who gets to the basket first will grab the whole basket and have it them to themselves. And but the kids, what they said they do, they decided to hold hands, and then they ran holding hands towards the basket of sweets, and they all shared the sweets equally. And that missionary says to the kids, "Why did you do that?" Because it says, "We cannot be eating when one of us is starving, you know." And that alone in itself, I mean, I think that's a story that in summary is what Ubuntu is all about. So as a priest, I would say yes. I've seen Ubuntu at play, and I've seen people caring out for each other. But I would want if I'm to be honest, you know, in capital cities and in acculturation, sometimes we have that loss of identity that is coming, mainly. Oh, I'm sorry, Izzy for South Africa. Sorry for that. We have that loss of identity sometimes that comes from maybe that individualistic societies, sometimes probably what we see in movies and what we see on TVs, and which is something that is regrettable, because we're losing our identity all in the name of movies, or all in the name of, you know. But in Zimbabwe, really, Zimbabweans are very hospitable, very nice people. You'd really realize that that Ubuntu spirit is there, and people love each other, and we look for each other, and we are a community, you know. And it's something that we should be thriving to keep, and we should be thriving to say, "Oh, we don't want to let this go," because that's what defines us as African people. I am because you are. I am because we are. You know, I cannot be when you are not.
Thank you for that, Kutsasha. So that the anecdote that you have of the kids holding hands, that's actually something that's reenacted in the film that the Ubuntu Festival was based or was initiated from. But it is that idea of, do we go together and participate and engage and all receive, or do we have this, I'm against you? And I think when as I think of the experience within particular contexts or personal experiences within particular contexts, when I see what's happening in my communities and I think what's expected outside, they don't match. They don't match. There's this idea that we need to give to our neighbor. There's this, that, and this is, I think, for most of us, we're brought up with this idea, give to your neighbor, make sure that others have as well. If you have food, you half the food if somebody else doesn't have, and you hand it over. Because what type of experience is that? That soul-based experience is that for you to be eating, knowing full well that your neighbor, the person next to you, that does not have, and if anything, is watching you eat. And I think for most of us, that's a soul-crushing thing. But I think I'm also interested in, both of you are active ACWAY members. You're doing work, you are going places, you are engaging with communities. And I think not necessarily Ubuntu, but if we want to use this idea of interconnectedness, this idea of wanting to reach out, I think I would be interested to know, like, to what extent that plays a role in how you engage with your communities, or when you're presenting, or when you are holding space for dialogue. To what extent is that a part of your plans, your experiences? And what do those outcomes look like? So when you do create those spaces, Khadija, would you like to go?
Thank you for the question. I think that through my personal involvement or engagement in various projects and communities, my understanding of Ubuntu has evolved really significantly. I've witnessed a firsthand of a positive impact of collective action and solidarity in driving a positive change in my community, and also engaging in volunteerism at a young age really helps me to understand the importance of giving, of helping others without expecting something in change, And I started to think why I'm interested in being active in my society, why I feel satisfied and happy when I help others, when I put my expertise in the hands of my society. And I realized that it's a kind of, it's a way for me to feel more accepted in the Italian society, because unfortunately I faced different Islamophobia and racism and prejudice. So I decided to be more active in order to show to myself that I can be part of the society, the Italian society, and I can demonstrate to everyone that I care about Italy. I care about my community because I'm Italian. I'm Muslim, but I'm still Italian. And I'm also Moroccan, so I don't have any kind of shame in being African. I'm proudly African, but also I'm proudly Italian and European. And also engaging in international events that promote education in a global citizenship way, and also intercultural and interfaith dialogue helps me and allowed me to see individuals from different backgrounds coming together to share experiences and work towards common goals. These experiences really reinforced my belief in the power of Ubuntu to unite people across culture and drive a meaningful change. And I also wanted to say that the importance of the education that my parents gave me really shaped my identity and shaped my value, because my parents really shared and makes me love the values such as compassion, such as mutual respect, and the importance of tolerate others because they are diverse and because I'm diverse. So my diversity became something really unique, and I'm using my diversity in order to feel part of my community. So this is the Ubuntu value inside my activeness in an Italian society that nowadays is really pretty with a far mentality, and we are struggling a lot with Islamophobia, but we are still here. We love our country, and we believe in the beautiful of diversity and in the beautiful of unicity that we all have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khadija. Kuzaisha, any responses?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Sorry, you wanted to say? Go ahead.
Oh, no, go. Oh, sorry. The question in terms of your, wait, where was I?
Okay, you were saying, yes, my understanding of Ubuntu evolved based on
Yes.
the work. Okay. So yes, really, as you have heard, that I am a lecturer of world religions, and I do teach people who are trained to be priests, in particular Anglican priests. And one of the things I had an opportunity to read widely about other religions, because that's what I teach to other students, and it is of interest to know that there is no religion that really promotes hate, or that promotes us trying to hate other people or to promote violence. I just want to give a reference to Christianity, and actually I'm just giving example of three religions. Christians believe that you love one another as you loved yourself. You know, it's one of their golden rule that they have. And there's this religion that is called Jainism, and Jainism, they says that you should not hate anything that is living. In their, it's below, there are 32 verses in the Chinese holy book that uh, advocate that anything that is living, you must not hate anything that is living. And then there's also this called schism, and schism says that if you want to be a true schism, you must love God in this creation. So and I can go in and go on. I can talk about Islam. I can talk about Hinduism. I can different religions. They don't encourage hate. So already you see that there is no space for hate in this world. So whenever I do dialogue, I have no problem to go into somebody who's Islam and have a meal with them. I have no problem to go into Hindu and have a meal with them, because they are human beings. So I've really continued to know that the way of, in as much as people believe with what is different from them, what I've learned with dialogue and engaging with people, they are human being with me, and they love me, and they love other human beings. So there is no room for hate. So I will tell you that of course there might be people who propel war and hide against religion. There must be something. They might not be interpreting their religion correctly, but I think there is no religion that encourages hate, violence, and cruelty towards other people. So if I was not a lecturer, I probably was not going to get to know this and to experience this. So it gives me even more energy and desire for dialogue and interreligious dialogue and more inclusive societies, because I know that when I see an Islamic woman, she is my sister, and she is my friend, and she is part of me. In as much as I'm Christian, if I say a Hindu man, he is my brother and he's one of us. So that notion, so from time to time, I always find space to create dialogue and to engage people from different religions, because I was just trying to wake up one day and say that the world, if there is gonna be war, anything, let people don't include religion, because there is no religion that encourages people to go and fight and kill young women and kill young children and be cruel and be violent. So I would say that I no single day I've regretted on becoming a priest or a lecturer. Actually, it's one of the beautiful things God has done, calling me to be advocating for peace and for us to love His creation, because we are all created by God. And one last example is that when I attended the ACWAY forum in Doha in 2023, I made beautiful friends. I still talk to them. Some of them are Islamic, and I remember sending out. I do send out Ramadan messages. Those who are friends on Facebook, on the beginning of Ramadan, I send out Ramadan. I take time to pray for Muslims at the end of Ramadan and say I wish them well. I want them to connect with Allah in this way I want to meet with God when it's time for Easter and when it's Lenten time and when it's Lenten season, because I am human. That's my motto. I'm human first. Before I'm Christian, before I'm Black, before what, I am human.
I love that. I am human. I think if everyone just walked around with that idea as just a starting point for engagement, maybe we wouldn't have that many conflicts and wars. I'm also just aware of time, but I did have maybe one other question. So what I'm going to do is, if there are questions coming from any of our peace persons with us today, they're more than happy. I'm more than happy for them to either unmute or put up their hand if they have a question, or they can put it in the chat. But if it's for Khadija, Kuzaishe, or Babalwa, I think we'll move into just a 10-minute, 15-minute just Q&A. But maybe I'll start with the Q&A, and this could be we'll start with but this is for all three of you, Babalwa, Khadija, and Kuzaishe. Based on just our conversations here, and noting that I think for some of us, we're getting to an age where youth isn't applicable anymore, so we have to hand over to the next generation. For young activists coming into these spaces, how would you describe for them the type of principles that you would want them to have? If it was just one or two sentences, if it was something to do with Ubuntu or not. But based on your own experiences in, Italy, Morocco, in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, and, in your countries and abroad, what is maybe one or two pieces of advice you would give these young people who are coming into being interfaith dialogue practitioners or social justice advocates? What could that be? Sorry, I might be throwing some of you off. Even if it's just one piece of advice, by all means. And then if there's anyone else that has a question, please, or even just a comment, please just either unmute yourself, or you can just click hand up or just signify, and we can take it from there. Anyone could go first.
Sure, I'm happy to start. I had a wonderful conversation on, I think it was Wednesday, with Mungi Ngomane, and she is the granddaughter of Archbishop Tutu, and she has this beautiful book called Everyday Ubuntu. And so I'm just taking a bit of the wisdom that she shared during our conversation. And one of the things I think young people really can take is this idea of curiosity. I loved what you said, Izzy, about breaking bread and what it means to actually know our neighbors, and just the act of sharing your food with someone. And I think that there are two sort of contingencies for that. The first is that you've got to know that the other person wants food or needs that food. And secondly, you've got to know the person, right, to be able to do that well. And so I think that there's something beautiful about breaking bread, because it gives you the opportunity to do this thing of knowing the other person. I have an opportunity to know who you are, and then I have the opportunity to know what you need and how I'm able to then share what I have with you, and you can share what you have with me. But really, that all is a process of relationship building. It's all a process of understanding each other. And so I do agree with what our brother Kuzaishe shared earlier, just around there are spaces where we don't even know who our neighbors are. I don't know the person who lives across my street. And that's a scary idea, because at least from the community I come from, we know each other. I know your name. I know your daughter. I know, everything about my neighbors. We know each other on a very deep level. And so we're able to meet each other's needs because we're able to have that conversation. And I think that starts from a place of having a genuine curiosity and appreciation for those who are around us. So for young people who are entering, at least younger than me, who are entering the interfaith space and who are activists, you know, I think it's always important to keep that desire, that curiosity, that desire to want to know more and to learn more, having sort of a beginner's mindset consistently, I think is a really beautiful thing. The benefit of being young, I think, is that young people have amazing ideas and great thoughts, and like sitting across from other young people, I'm just always inspired. And I think that we improve only when we continue to be in a space of curiosity and wanting to learn more, particularly before we make assumptions. And so asking questions and you know, being eager to learn new things, I think, and remaining open to learning new things and things that might not be easy to learn or might not be easy to, you know, try and understand, that might challenge you a lot about what you believe or where you've been or what you think. But that curiosity is such a beautiful practice of community and living in diversity. So that would be my piece of advice is, yeah, remain curious.
Thank you for that. Remain curious, being curious to those around you. Kazaisha, go ahead.
I mean, as she was just speaking, is Babalawa, is that correct? Babalawa, is that how you pronounce your name?
It's Babalwa.
Babalwa, okay, Babalwa, okay. I was just reminded there is a I think a famous saying that says as you're talking about us knowing your neighbor and love thy neighbor, you know, they say that it takes a village, isn't it, to raise a child. You know, it's unfortunate that young parents that are coming, they say, oh, my child, my responsibility. I remember that when we were growing up, you know, when you do a mischief in society, a lady from across the street or in your area seeing you do mischief could beat you up, right, and spank you and told you to no, correct yourself. So I started to cement that no, that it might be it might be really it's something that we really need to continue promoting Ubuntu, because we really need to go back to the basics. I mean, when I say basics, I say, I mean, we really need to go back and do what our parents did to us, what our grandparents did to us, because it really made us to be hardworking young people in society. Anyway, coming to the advice I have for young people like me who are entering this space, I'll say that interfaith really desires hard work and patience. You know, sometimes you don't always get it right, and sometimes people misunderstand your ideas, and sometimes people are not really there to listen to you. But hardworking and patience, you need to know what's happening. You need to know the mega threats that are happening in society. You need to be conversant. You need to be literate. You need to understand, and you need to give up that positive energy. So put in the hard work, and please just know that it takes a little bit of patience sometimes. And but with patience and hard work, you can always achieve it, and you can always be there. But I have no regrets being an interfaith activist, being a Christian and being an interfaith, because all we want to do is we want the world to become a better place. And I have been in Canada since last year, and I tell you that I'm in a very small community called it's in East Canada. It's called the Labrador Straits. And it's a very beautiful community, very good people, and we are a small community, and everybody knows someone. You know, everybody knows someone, everybody knows someone, and it's good that way. So yeah, to all the young interfaith activists out there, and also it's always good to connect with those who have gone ahead of you and seek mentorship and seek encouragement and seek help. And to those of us who are in the space, so far some of us we are in there but we haven't achieved it yet. Let's also create time for those who are upcoming. They need our love, our support, our mentor. Let's just put them down, but let's be there for them, guide them, and walk them through. I still need support and help. But anyway, yeah, that's good. That's all.
Thank you so much, Kazaisha. Khadija, go ahead.
Okay, so one piece of advice that I would love to offer to young people is to cultivate kindness. I think that by approaching interaction with an open heart and mind, you will naturally begin to recognize the interconnectedness of humanity and the importance of a collective well-being. Remember that small act of kindness and compassion can have a ripple effect, positively impacting not only those who directly involved, but also a large social fabric. Whatever leading a listener, her to a friend in need, volunteering in your community, or advocating for justice and equity, every action rooted in Ubuntu contributes to building a more and harmonious and equitable world for all of us. And I also wanted to say that we should smile to our brothers and sisters. There is a beautiful hadith from our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, peace be upon him, that says smiling is a charity. So try to smile more to your brother and sister, and welcome others with your beautiful smile, because smiling, you can really giving a charity just with your smile. So keep smiling. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm absolutely loving just these pieces of advice, because I think like this is what I would have wanted to know when I started coming into these spaces, to know that it's going to take hard work. You're going to hit walls. Sometimes you need to just be kind because people won't understand you. So let's just be kind to the context, to the person, but also to just be curious. That curiosity does lead you to very interesting places, but still to be curious, to ask questions. Because it also allows you to broaden your horizons, it broadens your spaces. Also, it allows you to meet people that you wouldn't necessarily meet on a day-to-day through that curiosity. I'm going to pause there, and I am very much aware of the time, and I'm deeply apologetic that technically there's only 2 minutes. But I maybe just want, if it's okay with our speakers and everyone, if we had another 5 minutes, just to open up if there is a question or a comment. Happy to entertain that. But if not, we will then also just close. I will just leave a space for anyone to say something.
I have a quick maybe question, comment, I guess a question from my just personal experiences. By the way, my name is Lilia. I was born in Russia, in a Muslim community in Russia. So in a Muslim community in Orthodox country, educated in the West. So throughout my life, I'm a very communal person. Like even when I live right now in Europe as well, I always bring people to my home. I cook my national food. So there's this like deep sense I need a community around me. But that's one thing. So it's deeply rooted in my individuality. And at the same time, when we go through the Western education, you know, study Europe, the US, the best education in the world, it's very deeply individual centered. And sometimes, and you feel, and it's not necessarily bad, right? It's also very human centric, but where like sometimes there is clash, and how to navigate those clashes between individual taking care. I guess it's been mentioned by Babalwa as well, like taking care of yourself versus doing what's best for your community. And for me, sometimes that comes into clash. How do we navigate that, right? Do you put yourself first and your well-being, let's say so, before you can do something for your community? Because sometimes, yeah, they don't align. I guess that's my concern.
That's an interesting dilemma. Anyone from our panelists would like to respond to that?
Okay, I'll try. I maybe before I respond, I just want to hear if I get your question right. Are you saying that when you talk about Ubuntu, your question is, are you saying that you put others' needs before yours? Is that what you're asking? Or I didn't hear you correctly?
Yeah, I'm still not sure if that's
Okay.
the meaning of Ubuntu, because
Okay.
it is, but at the same time, as Babalwa said, you also have to take care of yourself first.
Yeah.
right?
Okay. So yeah, of course, Ubuntu is not about you neglecting yourself so that you can carry the burdens of the society and you becoming miserable so that you take it. But it's more like sustainable development. You know, when you talk about sustainable development, we talk about using the resources, the present day resources, without compromising those of the future. But it doesn't mean that you don't have to use the resources yourself today because you're saving them for people of tomorrow. But when you talk about Ubuntu, you're telling that, okay, yes, take care of yourself, put your needs, but don't be selfish to the extent that your needs sacrifice maybe the happiness of others, or maybe sacrifice the well-being of other people. Of course, there are incidences where what you like the most is probably what no society is not gonna like, or maybe what you believe in is what society is gonna believe in. It's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to look after yourself, and it's okay to be yourself. But where possible, know that you don't live in a vacuum. You live in a society where other people live, and they want you to love them, and they want you to take care after them. So in as much as you do whatever you do, just try to be as accommodative to people as you can and their needs, but without compromising your own mental health, your own space, your own safety, your own likes and your own dreams. So whatever you do, do it for the benefit of for you, but thinking that I don't live in a vacuum. I'm living in a world where there are different kinds of people and different kinds of boundaries. So whatever I do, I don't have to be harmful to other people. I don't know if I have explained it, answered it well, but I would maybe others would also want to come in and maybe explain or disagree with what I've just said. That's okay.
Yeah, I think what Lilia you're asking is it's a difficult challenge as an activist. I think it's a difficult one because there are times where we have to think about how we are prioritizing self versus the work that we're doing. And I think there's an ideal, and I think the way that Kudzai has sort of spoken about it is, I think the ideal that we aim for, and I think you just, beautifully expressed it. I think also that there are times where in reality, we find ourselves sacrificing ourselves for what's needed for the movement. I think it's a difficult one to answer. I am also navigating what that looks like. And I want to be honest that it's not a perfect, I have not got it perfectly down. I'm still figuring it out. I think for me, what I recognized is that the more I lean into community, the easier it actually is for me to be able to take care of myself. So the more I know that in a movement or in my activism, this is not a journey that I'm on by myself, and that I have to have everything together and perfect, and I have to show up every day in the same way. But when I recognize that I have people around me who are with me in whatever we're working towards, who I trust, who care as deeply about this work as I care about this work, who give of themselves as well generously within this work. There are times where then I can say, I can step out because there's a community here who can hold. And there are moments where they will need to step out and I then step in. So the more I think we lean into community, the easier it becomes to do the work of prioritizing self when we need to, and then being able to prioritize the work that we do when we also need to. And again, bringing us back to this idea of Ubuntu, we are unable to achieve anything if we're trying to do it by ourselves. But the more that we connect with our community and communities of trust and communities of understanding and care, the work becomes, it's still challenging, it's still difficult, but it becomes easier to navigate how to prioritize self and prioritize the work.
Amazing. Thank you both.
Thank you for that response. There's just another question. This is from Riley. What would you recommend for someone who is Western to do in order to learn more about this concept and other cultures?
Well, I'm going to do sorry, yeah, Khadija, I'll do a shameless plug. The Charter for Compassion has a wonderful set of resources, but also, you know, on the Charter for Compassion website, there are a lot of resources relating to this concept of Ubuntu and different ways that people have come to practice it around the world. But also there's a deep focus on how it's practiced obviously on the African continent. But I think there's so much material out there on what Ubuntu is. You know, as I said earlier, like there are even economic policies and justice reform policies and you know, financial sort of imaginings of how Ubuntu can be integrated within our system. And so there are loads of resources to sort of dive into. But I think we do Ubuntu, most of us in this work, even, we're doing it every single day. And so, yeah, I think, yeah, there are a whole lot of resources, and I'd love to share more resources with you to sort of dive in.
Khadija, did you want to?
I just
Go
wanted
ahead.
to add that the best way to navigate more in the Ubuntu principles is to attend cultural events and workshops such as Ubuntu Festival in South Africa, or also trying to find in your own city or country if there are some African organizations that they used to organize some seminar or workshop about the Ubuntu. And also the best way ever is to travel to South Africa. I've been there and it was amazing. And being in South Africa really helped me to feel more connected with the Ubuntu meaning itself, and also to the atmosphere in seeing and knowing more the African culture, specifically the South African culture. Yeah. Those are my tips.
That's a lovely response for both of you. Again, just a way of time, the slide's going to go off. I just wanted to maybe give time to Kyoko Kimura Morgan, who is here and shared a lovely just comment, but I'm not sure you wanted to maybe come on off mute and say something.
Well, I said it there, but thank you so much. I have been living in South Africa for 32 years. I'm a member of a Buddhist community, and we were so fortunate to be invited to take part at the Ubuntu Festival, and we all enjoyed and we love to stay in touch. And something, as you say, my mother, Japanese mother, had a Ubuntu spirit. I think it's a universal, but not necessarily, you know, she wasn't eloquent to explain what it was, but she had that spirit of Ubuntu. So in my community, everybody knew who I was. I was a daughter of her, my mother. And yeah, being in South Africa and reignited me the spirit, because I have just experienced it, especially in township community. I was there. I couldn't tell which child was whose parents, you know, because he or the child could go to anyone in the community, and then being, especially baby, you know, being carried. And I just, the more I experienced it, it became also natural to me. And I'm so grateful for being able to experience it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that response and just that anecdote as well. That was really lovely for you to share with us. I think this is it. I think this is it, unless there's any final comments. I'm going to just close and say, from ACWAY and the bottom of my heart, I would like to thank you, Babalwa, Khadija, and Kuzaishe, for taking time out of your Sunday to be with us and to have this conversation about Ubuntu. And also its impact on youth activism and interfaith dialogue. I think what is also coming out of this for me is just the necessity for us to to create spaces to have these conversations, or at least to share the ethos of it. I mean, I think this is something that has come out, but it's Ubuntu isn't something that one is able to teach, but it's something that you experience. And to also note that we've all experienced some form of it in our lives, in our own contexts, whether we call it Ubuntu or something else, but it does exist. And I'll just pause here by saying, or I'll just end here by saying that I'm hoping that whatever comes out from this conversation, it's that, you know, as we move into our spaces, as we move into doing the work on the ground in a world that I think is burning for all of us, that we just hold on to either this concept or something similar, so that we do humanize, we do recognize, we do engage with the other as a full human being worthy of love and compassion. And I will pause there. Thank you so much, Babalwa, Kudzaishe, and Khadija. And thank you everyone for being with us. Vasu, I do see you. Thank you. To everyone. And we will have more sessions like this. I believe we do have everyone's information. When the new session does come about, we will definitely share that. But it was wonderful to have everyone here. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much, Izzy.
Thank you, friends.
Thank you.
Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Izzy. Thank you so much, team.